Hi, Tristina. We're just waiting for everyone to trickle in. Thanks for joining us today for the next hour. Hello, hello. This is so exciting. It's my first time doing an IG Live book discussion at that. So come on in and join in on the discussion that is about to happen. Hello, hello, everybody. This is so exciting. Does everyone have their drinks? Hello, hello. So wait. Have my lemonade. Hello, Dr. Ramsey.
Hey, we're here.
We are here and this is happening.
It is, it is, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, then let's get started as people trickle in. I'm sure they already know who you are, but I guess the best thing is just have you introduce yourself for a little bit because we are posting this video on our account later on today.
All
So
right.
start with introductions.
Well, for those who do not know, my name is Dr. Adam Ramsey. I graduated from Southern College of Optometry in Memphis, Tennessee. And I currently own Socialite Vision, which is an optical boutique in Palm Beach Gardens. I also have 3 Indian reservations that I have practices on, and I have satellite offices on those reservations. I speak for a bunch of companies, and I wrote a book, which is I think was the purpose of the conversation. So play chess, not checkers, the practical guide to warm start your dream optometric practice. And it's a nuts to bolts guide on how to open a practice. I guess that's what we're getting into today. So you guys can post your questions on here, share, tell a friend, and then we'll go through it. And anybody who asks specific questions from the book, that question gets goes to the top. Shout out to SEO, all the SEO grads, Memphis, Tennessee, in the house.
All right. Well, we already had a few questions trickle in, but I was researching kind of facts about being self-employed and whatnot, and I found a statistic, and it said that 60% of graduates from optometry school, they enter into the practice of optometry as employees, but most of them actually want to be self-employed. And so how far into your process did you discover that you wanted to be your own boss?
I got into optometry because I wanted to work for myself. So I was never a person, I don't take orders or direction from other people very well. I am an only child. I am a lone wolf. So I worked for other people and I was a great employee and the patients loved it and I did my job while I was there. But I was always the guy on my lunch break trying to figure out a master plan to get up out of here. That was always my thing. I think most students and doctors coming out is that you have to do the work. So you have to do the research. It's just not, nobody's going to just hand you $150,000, $200,000 a year, working 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, get out by 5, kind of gig. Those just don't happen. Not in the middle of a city. You know, if you want to be 20 minutes to the airport, you're not, those opportunities are not there. If you're willing to drive an hour, if you're willing not to be close to a mall, you might be able to get those opportunities. But the other ones, it's not going to happen. So you have to be creative and create your own opportunities.
Right, right. I think I was listening to you talk on another person's interview, but you said that, like, why am I hustling and helping someone else make that 30% when I could be making that 30% for myself? And that really resonated for me because I remember being in optometry school and it's like, it's such a scary path to embark on, but you know, eventually it's like you see all these successful people out there and you're like, how did they do it? And so I'm glad that you wrote your book so that we can demystify that and have kind of a checklist for these students and ODs to kind of follow and start their own practice. One of the questions that did come in today was kind of just more general. Was it worth the hassle? And I would say probably, was it worth the hustle? You can quickly answer this and we can move on to the other topics.
I would definitely say it was worth it. It's worth it, right? So people get into private practice for different reasons. You can get into it for fame or fortune. Some people get into it. I know a doctor that she works while her kids are in school. So she works from 9 to 3, Monday through Friday.
Wow.
right? Because she's able to control her schedule and she works. And if her kids are off, she's off, right? And she can
Make it work.
decide to make as much money or as little money as it is for her. So it depends on what your reason. So when somebody said was it worth it, it depends on what you were asking for. What were you going into it for? If you want to work, if you work in a setting, they're determining the patient load, they're determining the equipment you use, they're determining your hours, they're determining the EHR that you have to put up with, the contact lenses you have to dispense, the policies in which you can do when you can see people to come back. Don't let anybody tell you that, oh, you can do what you want. If you have too many follow-ups for dry eye and not enough refractions, that commercial place is not going to be happy. Now, if you see all the refractions that come in and you still find time to do dry eye and all these other things, then they're not going to bother you. But if you start saying, I want to do the medical model and I want to slow down my number of refractions and I want to raise my exam prices from 79 to 179 because I feel like I'm worth it a little bit more, and they lose prescriptions because of that, you will not be there very long. So it just really depends on what you're going into it for. What is your motivation? It's been worth it for me because I had the right, for the reasons I went into it, it's been wonderful. The opportunities have been great, but everybody's different.
Right, right. Definitely, there sounds like a lot of unique opportunities when you are a practice owner because it's kind of like a one-man show. You get to decide, you have that autonomy, you can really decide how you want to involve yourself in the community and the services that you provide. One thing that in your book you didn't really touch up on was like, how did you decide whether you wanted to start Warm yourself or find another partner and join in with them as well? Because I know when you have two doctors, you can share the overhead, which is like a pro of that, but obviously it's like a married relationship and you really got to find the right spouse. So how did you make that decision?
So I would tell anybody, my first preference would be to buy a practice. Anybody who's looking at, I wrote the book about how to open warm because there wasn't a lot of information about that. But if you can find a great practice to buy, I would tell you, look for a busy, ugly practice.
Right.
Okay. Because you can make something look pretty in a weekend. You cannot make it busy in a weekend. So I can go to Home Goods and buy new furniture. I can buy new equipment. I can buy an OCT. I can paint. I can change the walls in a 4-day weekend. But you cannot go from seeing 4 patients a day to seeing 24 patients a day in a weekend, right? So look for a busy practice. A busy, beautiful practice is going to be expensive. A busy, ugly practice you might get a deal on, right? So it just really depends what you're going into it for. So I would have preferred buying a practice. Now, I was kind of stuck on a particular area. Now, going back, would I still be stuck on that particular area? Maybe not so much. I'm still happy with my decision, but I would have bought a practice if there was one available that was good. Now, there were practices for sale in the area I wanted, but they wanted like $300,000 for their practice, but they only grossed $300,000.
Right.
And to give you an idea, I grossed $300,000 in my first year of practice myself, was starting from zero. So why would I pay you $300 for what I could do myself, right? What you do is you pay for what you can't do. So if you were grossing $600 or $750 and you wanted $300, then yeah, you're letting me skip ahead, right? You're letting me skip down to year 3 or 4 at year 1. But I wouldn't pay you for what I could do for my, and then I got to work through all your kinks and bad habits that your staff and your patients in your office has. I got to fix that. So I would have bought a practice if it was for sale and there was one that I liked, or I would have partnered with somebody else, but there wasn't anybody looking to partner. In my county, there's under 10 practices that have more than one doctor in it.
Wow.
Practices. There's a whole there's commercial places that have a whole bunch of places, but most of the private practices are either husband and wife, and even a lot of the private practices, the husband or the wife is the optician, and then the doctor's the spouse is the doctor. There's very few multi-doctor practices in my county, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to do that. So it was a choice of continue doing what I'm doing or go do it yourself. and go. But I would tell you, anybody who's listening, if you have the opportunity to get a practice to buy that's fair, or somebody wants to partner with you and you date them a little while, same thing like getting married. You know what I mean? You got to be engaged for a little bit. You got to let's because it is not easy to get out of those situations if you guys don't get along. You have to agree on, do I want to buy this OCT or not? And they may not. Do I want to hire this employee or not? There's a lot of stuff that you have to do when you are when you have a partner that you don't have to do by yourself. It is a good situation if you can make it work, but it is something that you have to definitely look into. So I would have went the other routes if it was an option. It just was not an option for me in the area that I was looking. If I would have expanded where I was looking, there were more opportunities, and maybe I should have done that and not been so stuck on, I want to be right here in this area. Maybe, I don't know, but I'm still happy now. I'm happy later on now.
Right. Well, that actually kind of segues into one of the questions we got, and it was actually about location. So, I mean, we can go on and start talking about that. But her question, Rachel Ng, she was asking if there are any specific calculations that she can make to determine if a location is too saturated for doctors. So I think maybe more broadly, we could talk about maybe real estate, how do you choose the right place, and then kind of like what you actually have to research before determining whether or not that is a good place to set up shop. So you can kind of talk about that more broadly.
So it depends on where you are. So in New York, once there's not a doctor on that street, it's a good opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. In New York, there's an optical on literally every street, right? But in the middle of Kansas, you may want to have a 10-mile radius in between offices, right? Mm-hmm. So it really depends on the area in which you're going. Now, the rule of thumb of three dentists for every one optometrist, I think it's pretty consistent in that people go to the dentist 3 times as often as you go to get your eyes checked. So you would like to stay in that ratio. Mm-hmm. I would also say it depends on what you're doing in that area. What is going to be special about your practice? Now, most people don't realize that you have to figure out, why would I come see you? Having good Google reviews is not enough. What's going to separate you? And then when you try to get your bank loan, we can talk about that later, you have to tell the bank what is different about you than them. And I think those are questions you have to answer, and you should answer for yourself. So if you are going to be a specialty contact lens and only do scleros, right, or specialty lenses, and you weren't going to have an optical, then you may be able to be in a super saturated area because there's a lot of people that need that service, and other optometrists would refer to you. So being in a saturated area might be a positive because you would get referrals from other places, right? So I know a doctor that's an optometrist that started off and he wanted to be a referral center for, the ocular disease. So he didn't have an optical. He wasn't doing any refractions. He literally wanted you to send me your glaucoma, send me, and he's going to deal with that. Now, being in a saturated area would be a positive if you want to be a referral center, right? So it goes down to your core of knowing who, what, why, when, how. Knowing your why. What are you doing? Looking at your situation. Every situation is actually going to be different. So you just have to find what is the best setup for yourself.
Right. And I know in your book you did have a calculation, or it was a statistic, and it was like a certain number of patients per doctor, but again, it varies from urban to suburban environments.
Right. That's an estimation. So about 2,500, 3,000. In school, they said 5,000, and that's probably not happening. It's not going to happen. Not in the areas where I want it to be. So I'm 15 minutes to the airport, right? So that's probably not going to happen. There's too many doctors in this area. Nova is an hour away. Every year, 5 doctors from Nova stay and don't move away, kind of thing. So that's not going to happen here. But in other areas, that might be possible, depending on how close you are to an optometry school and how close you are to a major metropolitan area. Those numbers may be more accurate. But the closer you are to anywhere fun and cool, no, it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to figure out your differentiator. But it doesn't have to be the end of the world, because you can be in the middle of all those people And if you have equipment, I don't even speak for them, but NeuroLens, or you have Enchroma, or you have something that's different and unique about you do low vision, you do VT, you do something, you see kids. For me, I don't see kids until 7. So if you were office and say, hey, I'll see newborns until 13, and after 13
Right.
or 18, they're not staying at my office anymore. You could be in a very densely packed area and it wouldn't actually matter. So, those are real generalizations, but everybody has to determine their story and have an appropriate business plan to say, how am I going to succeed in this area? And then actually go at it. Because if you get frustrated by writing a business plan, I would tell you don't open a practice. Don't be the boss. Because if you get frustrated with having to answer those questions, this ain't for you. You are going to be unhappy because you have to be able to answer that question. Sit down. Before I opened, I sat down in the parking lot of the office and said, why would they come here? Look at your own marketing, look at your own website, look at your own stuff and say, would I choose me? Because I'm picky. I look at my dentist, I'm my primary care doctor, everything. And I look at the reviews, I look at the insurance, I drive by, I look at the waiting area, I see if it's clean, I see if it's nice. How accessible is it? I think about, can I get there? Is it on my way home? Blah, all the things that I think about for my own self and my own care. Think about it from the patient standpoint. Would they come to you? Would they be able to find you? How would they find you? And when you answer those questions, then you can determine for yourself. But I don't think people sit down enough and ask themselves the tough questions and sit and answer it. And because sometimes they want the answer to be yes more than it actually is yes. You don't really want to go through the tough questions. And you can sit down and look at somebody's practice and say, oh, you're struggling. And I'd be like, I look at your stuff and I'd be like, I can see why. You should be struggling.
Right.
It just really depends. So location does matter. Now, in that same chapter on location, I made a point that I have front. You can see my business from the road. I'm on the first floor. You can walk right up, right? But I could also see a scenario in which you could be on the 3rd floor of a medical office building and be successful because the rent I pay on the 1st floor is different than the person on the 3rd floor. The second you have to get on the elevator is cheaper, right? So could you get on the 2nd floor of an office or a medical office building and cut your rent in half and be successful? I could see that happening, because patients have my address. I get some, but they're call aheads. They're not necessarily a walk-in. They saw me online. They looked it up. They looked on the insurance. They looked on Google or Yelp, and they found my address, and they put it in the GPS, and they took Waze to my office. So if when they got to my office, they had to ride on the elevator to go up, I don't think it would have changed their thing if I had good reviews and I took their insurance and they liked my website and they liked the pictures online. I don't think that would have mattered that much. So, there are scenarios. Everyone is different. You look and say, if I lose a few patients here and there, but my rent is half as much as it would have been if I was on the 1st floor, and maybe the one on the 2nd floor is already built out, so I lower my construction costs by $50,000 or $100,000. There's some scenarios in which I could see that working. So, there isn't a cut and dry rule. Anybody's looking for an easy rule and this is what I do every time. Nah, it's not every time. You got to figure it out.
Well, what I appreciated in the book is that there were a list of questions for you to start that conversation with yourself, because starting your own practice, it really is asking all the potential questions and laying it all out. And that all segues into a business plan, because you want to project and describe what your practice is going to be and convince someone else to invest into it. So I think that going through that exercise is, you could start at any time. So all our pre-optometry students or current optometry students, you can start that process now. I think a lot of us think that, I need to just sit down and get all this done. But really, it's a little bit of a thought process. And one of the suggestions that you made in your book was start shadowing or just visiting practices and just seeing what works, what doesn't work from the consumer side. So when you are on the other end and doing the planning, you can more easily recognize, things that you need to plan out so that, if that scenario were to come up, there is a solution to it, or you make sure your branding is consistent there. I guess in terms of location, one thing that, you know, I had a question about was negotiating. Like when you're choosing places, it seems like, and you're building out your practice, there's a lot of negotiating that happens. And I personally am not super comfortable with it. So what is your advice for that process? And just, you know, owning up to that, your questions and what your demands are, and
So
no compromise.
I would say education is really important. So knowing the numbers. So know what the competitors are, know what the comps are, because the more educated and the more information you have, the more you can go back to that landlord and say, hey, I like your space, but I could also move over here. So, and they are $10 cheaper. Now, I do like your space more. It's already built out. I like it's on the first floor, or I like that I have more parking here. But you know what? This plaza over here is offering me X, Y, and Z. So, you know, if you match that, I'll come there. If not, I'll go to this one. Right. And the landlords want they don't want to have empty bays. So they're willing to negotiate if you come in with information. And I think the more information you have for yourself, the more educated you are, the more confident you're going to be. When you go into there, anybody who knows me, I'm a very confident, some people may say cocky person. Okay, I'll take that. Okay. But I like to go into situations in which I am the most educated and I feel comfortable in that environment because I know my surroundings. I know what's going on. I like to understand what I'm walking into. So same thing with, you know, lease negotiations. It is understanding that they're charging $28 a square foot, $35 a square foot. This one over here is charging $22 a square foot, you know, and look at the contract length. You know, look at I would really look at if the space is built out. If you have to gut it, that makes a huge difference. Is the landlord willing to contribute to the renovations because they keep it after you move out? That is, those are things that stay with the building. So usually if what's called a gray shell, where there's usually dirt on the ground, the landlord will pay to build out the first time around, or they'll give you, if you want gold ceilings, okay, they're not going to pay for that, but they will get what's called a rough build out in which it is ready for plumbing. The drywall is in there. The majority of stuff is in there, and you may have to pay for it to be pretty. Most times they don't charge you rent during the build out, but I would tell you, the day you open for business, they put a letter in the mail saying rent is due. I didn't even tell them. I did my soft opening. Somehow they found out. The next day, I had a next saying, hey, let you know, rent is due on the first. And they prorated it from that day for the rest of the month and was like, pay this and then let me know rent's due the next day. So they had the video camera on me. I don't know what it was, but they were, but they didn't charge me while we were building out, which was good. And I got, and we get into this later, I got the cops called on me like 3 times when I was doing the build out because my construction guys, they would only get paid when they completed something. So when the weekend came up, Poppy wants some money for Friday. I said, Poppy, you don't finish. When you finish, you get the money. Poppy's there all day, staying there late. Listen, he over here double time. He's like, I'm finished. I said, okay, I'm in. I check it out. Here go your money. So they'll come stay. I had one time they were paying 2 in the morning. They get a cops call. I get a phone call. Police at your location. I'm like, what are they doing there? He said, the man was paying. He said, Poppy said, I need money. He said, let's go. I had it paid on a schedule. So you can either pay on a completion basis. So like a task. So tiling the floor is worth $1,000. Painting is worth $500, whatever. So that when that task is done, then you get paid. Or you can pay them on a percentage or a weekly. I didn't like the weekly because you could do a lot more in one week and a lot less in another, and you still expect to get paid Friday. Nah, you still ain't. The lights ain't up. What you mean? You're not getting nothing. No.
Right.
So, but in my building you couldn't do work after 10 p.m. and I found that pretty quick. But I told them I wanted to be open in 2 weeks. So
they better come through.
Listen, man, I came, I brought the coffee. I brought the Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I was like, coffee, donuts, sandwiches, pizza. Keep going. I said, listen, I paid the fine. Keep going.
That is so funny. But yeah, it was when I was researching kind of on private practices and whatnot. One of the things that came up was a penalty for if they don't meet the time, because that's when the rent starts clocking and you got to pay the bills. And so, is that something that you negotiated into, with your contractors, or was that something that wasn't even a problem because they were so motivated to complete the job?
You don't need a penalty if you ain't paying them up front. So it's either one way. You either pay them for completion of work, or you're giving them the money and then you're trying to take money back or give them a penalty on the back end. I think I don't like the penalty as much. I'd rather give the carrot instead of the rod. So it's just a better way to work for me. And I didn't have that issue too much because I picked my contractors. I sat one day, I had nothing in the space. I got a folding chair and a folding table, and I sat there and I booked my contractors 30 minutes apart. And I made sure they could see each other coming and going. Line them all up. And I say, hey, this is what I need done. Give me a bid. I'll let you know. And then whoever get the best bid wins. So they got to see the next one coming in. So they knew, and I told them straight up. I told them exactly how they was going to get paid. Some of them didn't even submit a bid. They was like, all right, nah, he's smart. I ain't finna be rolling with him. This ain't gonna work out the way you think. And then the ones that came through, they understood. I told them, listen, I need to be open in 1 month. I said, with all that work, I said, can you do it? And you get it done. So it's possible. I think it's just like before I even wrote my own book. So Al Kleinman has a great book on there, A Different Perspective. What's it called? The E-Myth Physician, E-Myth Optometrist, E-Myth Revisited. All of those are great books. Jerry Hayes has great books. There's 201 Secrets to a high performing private practice. Great book out there. There are Optometric Management has a great book out there. I mean, there are so many books out there that has a lot of stuff, and I think there's thousands of dollars of ideas in a $20 book. And some people are like, oh man, I need this. Oh man, I need that. Sit your behind down and read. Sit down and listen. Sit down and look. The content is out there. The resources are out there. There's no quick fix. There is no get rich quick scheme. It is all about hustle. It's all about drive. It's all about asking the right questions. It isn't going to happen overnight. None of it's going to happen overnight. It's not going to get busy overnight. It's not going to get fixed overnight. But it's also not going to get bad overnight either. So take a deep breath and relax. It's going to be okay. You can have a bad day. I've had days in the office where I'm like, holy crap, I made a terrible idea. This is a terrible plan. I changed my marketing. I changed my website. Adam, you're so stupid. Why'd you do that? And the next day I walk in and we make $10,000. And I'm like, see, I was a genius. I knew it from the beginning. I told Daryl that this was going to be a good idea, and he didn't believe me. And see, it worked out. And it's part of it.
Right. Well, it sounds like it kind of lines with that quote where you don't have to redesign the wheels. You just need to redesign the rims. Like, there's knowledge out there. We just need to get it to it. Listen. But, I feel like we got 2 questions on this. But during this whole process, did you need to hire a lawyer, a financial advisor? Do you think an MBA is needed? Those are some of the questions coming in. So thank you, Shawan.
All right. So I handle the MBA question. A lot of times an MBA is going to teach you, it's good information. It teach you how to acquire a customer. It doesn't teach you how to be nice, how to be kind, how to do customer service. Them kids at Chick-fil-A, they're the most pleasant 18-year-olds I've ever seen in my life. I see 18-year-olds everywhere else. They ain't never that pleasant, So being nice, having customer service, thinking about the customer and the patient, that don't take no MBA, right? It may give you a false sense of confidence. Okay, you can do it. There's nothing wrong with it if you like schooling and you want to learn. But I bet you could sit down and the same courses that are in that MBA course, if you wanted to read the book, read it. If you want to do it, do it. There's nothing stopping you from going to take an extra course. There's nothing stopping you from reading up on a webinar, podcast. The thing about it is YouTube has so much content out there.
Oh, true.
So much content between YouTube, podcasts, ebooks, regular books, like physical books. Some people, there are things that call book with pages. people still do that once in a while, which is actually flip a page and like put a little marker in there, the old school way. There is so much stuff there that if you want to learn. So I don't think it's necessary, but some of these optometry schools are combining an MBA course with their optometry degree. Hey, if you good, go for it. I mean, I'm not against it. I may get my MBA, but I don't think that would be the end all be all to opening a private practice.
Right.
So that's one thing. Two, you asked about a lawyer. And
well, let's just talk maybe more broadly about like the team. Like, who were the team of people that you needed to successfully open your practice? Was it a lawyer? Was there a real estate agent? Was there, someone who did marketing for you? Like, who was your first staff member? Kind of just, who was on your team? Because, teamwork is what makes the dream work, right?
Yeah. So I did hire a consultant when I opened to help get some of my thoughts and ideas together. I think you definitely have to do your and make sure that the consultant you're hiring is giving you a plan that's specific to you. A lot of the consultants out there are giving you a cookie cutter plan, and they're giving you a generic thing. And like I said before, what works in other areas may not work in your area. So how knowledgeable is the person that you're talking about? Understand your area and what's going on here. That's critical. I think if I took my time and I maybe waited a little while, I could maybe an extra 6 months or whatever, and I did the research more, I could do without a consultant, but I could also see the consultant helping. So there are scenarios, some people that a consultant is a great idea, and other people, if they answered all the questions, like I didn't have this book when I was doing it. So if I had more of these resources, I may not necessarily need some of that. You know what I mean? So it just really depends. And if I did my own research. So now with all the Zooms and the podcasts and all this stuff out there, there's way more content out there than when I decided. There just wasn't as much there. And now there's so much content that's available for free everywhere. So that's there. I hired a lawyer to look over my my lease. And I hired a lawyer, but I would tell you, you should hire somebody to look over the lease, because that lease is very critical. They go up on your rent regularly. They can charge you and bill you for different things. So you want somebody to look over that. Get somebody that specializes in leases, though. Don't just get any lawyer because it's my friend or my cousin or my sister's a lawyer.
Right.
I would get somebody that knows what the heck they're looking at to make sure that they're asking the right questions. If your lawyer doesn't make any changes or edits to your lease, then you could do that yourself. So there are, you want to make sure you have people that really specialize in that. And there are lawyers that do lease negotiations. There are companies that do that. And I think that is a worthwhile investment, helping somebody look over your lease and look over some of your stuff in the beginning. But getting somebody to give you some help in the beginning is not wrong. It just depends on how, when you get, and we can talk about loans and stuff in the bank. When you get a loan from the bank, they're going to look at a consulting fee as soft assets. So a hard asset would be the walls, the flooring, equipment, lighting, putting in a fan, putting in an extra sink. They are okay with paying for that. What they do not want to pay for is consulting. So what they did with me, and what they probably did with a lot of people, is they take the consulting money out of your marketing budget or your working capital budget. So they may give you $50,000 for marketing that you can use on ads. But if they take this 30 out of your 50, then you only got 20 left, right? Or if they were going to give you $50,000 after you open your doors, they'll give you $50,000 to give you a little buffer while you're open. Well, they may take that money out of your initial working capital money. So now instead of 50, you got $20,000 left over. Now the question is, was that consultant worth not having all that working capital? If you didn't have the consultant, could you have figured those things out on your own, even though it may have cost you some money along the way? Could you have figured it out? And the short answer is depending on the consultant. Some are worth it, some are not. So you really got to do your research and don't be in a rush. I think take your time, do your research, ask the right questions, and get a follow-up question. Meet with somebody, talk with them, whatever, meet with 3 or 4 other people, then maybe go back to the first person. And now you have some questions because you have more information that you can then ask the other person to get more educated. So there are some consultants that are worth it, and there are some that it's still going to be good information. It just may not be worth taking out of your working capital or your marketing budget. Now, if your bank does not take it out of that and they still give you all the working capital you want and all the marketing money you want, and the consultant money is allocated separately, then I would say that would be a good use of money.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that you touched up on that in the book as well, because I was like, oh, I didn't know that. You would think that the banks want you to be successful so that if you wanted to pay for a consultant, they would work that into, the budgeting. But I guess that segues into the elephant in the room, which is, how do you have enough money to actually even, start your own practice? So how do you, go about approaching the banks? Do you compare like, different offers? Like, does that affect your credit? We can talk about that, and maybe we can talk about, for some of our students who aren't graduated yet, what they can start doing now to kind of build themselves up to be ready to ask those banks for that money.
So from the student perspective, I personally do not think you should open a practice right out of school. My personal opinion, right? There are some school teaches you the idea and the concept around being a doctor. There is an art form to being an optometrist that you have to learn on the way out, right? So I don't know if I want to learn how to be an optometrist on my own dime and learn how to be a business owner in the first 6 months. That's a big hill to climb, okay? That confidence that you get after you get your first red eye and you prescribe Turbidex, and then you're like, are they gonna live? I hope so. And you see them back in a week and they love you, and you're like, oh, okay, it works, right? You don't want to do that in your own office day one. I just wouldn't want to do that. You know what I mean? I would want to work somewhere else first. So, so anybody as a student, yes, it's good to educate yourself. But I would, some people, I know I have some classmates that did it right away. But a lot of those people, if you ask their story, they had family members or parents that were optometrists. So they grew up in the business. They had a say in that. They had some other stuff. So sometimes we try to compare our lives and our situations to everybody else. Everybody's situation ain't the same. Okay? It ain't. Some of these people ain't got no student loans. They ain't got no pressure. Like, it's not the same situation. So don't try and compare and say, well, so-and-so did it. But what you don't know is that daddy bought that office for them. And it's not, everybody's going to be a little bit different. One thing is, you got to take care of your credit. Go to creditkarma.com. You can use other ones. I don't have no affiliation with any of this stuff. But you can look at your credit, look at your credit score, because your business has no business credit because it's not a functional business yet. So all you run your stuff off is off your personal credit. So they literally will be like, so Dr. Ramsey, so I see that you bought this big old car over here, and you got this house and you got a boat, and what's going on over here? Like, you didn't pay this credit card off. I see a lot of late fees over here. And you're like, well, remember that time I went to Vegas? I didn't have that money to pay that back. So you have to actually answer some of those questions for yourself. So, I would say a credit score, I put in there 640, really is 700. You need to have a 7 in the front to really give yourself some wiggle room so they give you fair pricing, because you don't want to take money out at a ridiculous rate that you can never get yourself out of that hole on. I did compare offers at the same time. So if you do a credit pull within 30 days for the same reasons, it only counts as one. So it doesn't hurt you to do it, but you got to do it within the same amount of time. So you got to, get your paperwork, get your stuff, and you tell them, do not run my credit until you are ready. Because there's a lot of stuff that you can have them show you and negotiate before you even pull your credit. You can show them, I had the bank and I said, listen, I'm going to pull my Credit Karma up, and you can look at it and tell me what offer I would get with this level of credit. You can go to annualcreditreport.com and get your FICO scores yourself. Right? And then the bank can tell you, with this credit score, this is what you would be offered. Now, if what they're offering you is terrible, then I don't need the bank to pull my credit to tell me what they could have told me before.
Right.
So don't let them just pull your credit and then to figure out that they give you a sucky offer. No, find out first. And then when you get one that we agree on, then that I have this credit score, can I get this? Yes. Then do I need 5 banks to pull my credit? No, I just need one. And then now I show you what I said I had, and we're done. So,
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of ways to go about it. It's just about being more educated with your stuff. Was that the question?
That was the question.
Okay.
Let's see. What? I guess this one's more general. Read the whole book, but it says, what is your number one piece of advice for starting cold? I guess in our case, starting warm. Maybe you could talk about the difference between starting warm and cold, because we've been talking about that, but that's been kind of the trend in the book. But buying new/old equipment, getting staff.
I mean, you just asked about the whole book. Okay, got
Right.
it. People, the first question is read the book. Okay, you can find the book on Amazon. You can find it on our website. There, the book. You can. It's easy. It's not that expensive. It's literally what you pay for dinner. Okay. It's going to give a lot more questions. I'm going to try and answer as much as I can. But there's more detail in the book, and there's little subtle nuances that I can't really explain in here. So I'll try. I'll take the last one.
Just choose one.
Yeah, the old and versus new equipment. My rule of thumb for equipment is if the equipment will be outdated before you can pay it off, then I would rather buy that new, because stuff that changes pretty quickly. I want to get the newest version. No, hold on, let me say that right. Hold on. Stuff like chairs. And fundus cameras and visual fields. Those don't change very often. So I would rather get good quality versions of that. And I bought those things new in the beginning, because my chair, I could have gotten a cheaper chair and saved a little bit of money, but now I'm 5 years out and my chair looks brand new. So why would I have saved a little bit of money on something that still looks good in quality? My visual field that I had from day one still function, and there isn't a newer version of a visual field machine. So that one is a better thing to buy new, because you have quality, you have your own.
Right.
Have bought used equipment and different things used, but it depends on how quickly that equipment turns over the life cycle of that equipment. The hard thing is stuff like OCTs and stuff. The life cycle of that equipment is so short. 3 years later and your OCT is outdated. You got last year's OCT. So if you're buying it, but you have a 5 or 6 year note on that equipment, but it goes bad every 3, then you need to find some way to save money so you can keep up. So some of those equipment, it might be better to lease or to find at a cheaper rate, because you have to trade it in so frequently that you need to find ways to save. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think when you get your loan and you break it out and they tell you you have this much for equipment, you have this much for frames, you have this much for your build out, and then you say, okay, what are my must-haves based on the type of office I am trying to run? If you're doing kids practice, do I really need an OCT? Do I really need a fancy visual field? Not really, right? So it depends. If I'm doing a VT office, do I need that? Nah, not really. So it just depends on what type of practice you're running. But a kid's practice, I may want an edger, because you can buy single vision lenses really, really cheap. So it might be worth it to yourself to buy single vision stock, which is very cheap, and having the edger will afford you the opportunity to be able to buy single vision stock lenses. And if I had a high kids or a high Medicaid practice, those Medicaid, you get a dispensing fee of like $15. You can't be buying expensive lenses if you're only getting $15. So it really depends on the type of practice that you are trying to open.
I guess since we're kind of talking about equipment, Ali asked the question, how does a new practice keep up with all the new technologies that are becoming standard, but their return on investment isn't necessarily justified?
Great question. I ain't trying to keep up with the Joneses. I'm not trying to keep up with I get pitched. If I can show you my LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram box, email box, the amount of reps that stop at my office literally every single day trying to sell me on their thing is the best thing ever. No. Okay. You need to figure out what works for your practice, and don't feel bad. Don't feel less than. Having good equipment is great, but you still need to know how the heck to use that equipment, and you still have to make it make sense. And at the end of the day, the most important thing you have in your practice is making sure that you're profitable and you're here and you're around for the next year for your patient. Okay.
Right.
Sometimes the newest and latest and greatest may not be the equipment you want to get, because some of those companies go under. So unless it's a big company, you got to be, the more educated, the longer you've been here out practicing, you realize that some of these new stuff, they go out pretty quickly.
Right.
Came in, and then all of a sudden your 5-year warranty is gone because that company is bankrupt.
Right.
So you know, be careful on what you're doing. So I definitely look at return on investment. Now, sometimes your return on investment may be that your patients see how nice and new and cool your practice is, and that you reduce the need for dilation as much, and that starts being a practice builder, because they go and tell their friends that, oh, I didn't get those drops put in my eyes. And now you may not necessarily see the direct return on investment on a billable aspect, but you may see that I get a lot more referrals now than I did before.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you don't have the air puff machine, because I have patients that have been in my practice for 5-6 years, and they still talk about an air puff machine, even though I've never had an air puff machine.
It's traumatic.
Ever. And they've been in my practice for 5 years, and they're still like, are we doing the air puff today? I'm like, Mrs. Smith, you've been here 5 times. I've never done it on you. Never. Not one time. It's that dramatic. So would spending $4,000 on an eye care tonometer for this little old thing, like, it's crazy how small it is, how expensive it is. But is that worth it? Yeah, because if she could ever remember that I don't do it, that is a practice builder, because, oh, this is the place that, you know, they don't do the air puff over here, you know. So certain things are practice builders, even though I don't make any extra money off an eye care tonometer. There is peace of mind to it. So I think there's a way to work around it and find an angle, but you still need to compare the return on investment and make sure you're getting a fair price and negotiate.
Yeah. I just saw that we had a question about, when kind of going back to what we were talking about, but when you open up your practice, at most of your buildup and construction, what percent came from personal savings, what percent came from bank loans? And I know in your book, you kind of answer that, saying that you should have at least a certain amount in your bank, in savings, and then it can add to the working capital. If you want to quickly answer that, we can go to more fun questions.
Yeah. I would say when you get a loan from anybody, they're going to want you to still work for yourself. So you should not be expecting the loan to pay you. The working capital is actually to pay your bills besides your own personal take home. So if you're going to work 2-3 days in your practice, you then are working 2 or 3 days. You're working 3 days minimum somewhere else. So a total of 5 to 6 days. I would say 3 days in your practice and 3 days somewhere else. You get 1 day off. If you need more than 1 day off in the beginning, don't open a practice. It's not going to be for you. So, but what you have to figure out now is, can I survive on 3 days of my salary, right? Because now, if you're not taking a salary home from over here, how do my book in which can I survive on only working 3 days? Now, if you went and got that brand new Mercedes-Benz truck, and you got a 5-6 bedroom house, you may not be able to survive on 3 days a week, you know. But if you're still driving the car from college, and you got a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, you might be able to survive on 3 day a week salary and build it up. So that's where going and doing your research and doing your stuff goes into it. And what I said in the book is, if you have to survive on 3 days a week afterwards, then survive on 3 days a week now. So for a year, take 3 days salary and separate it, and say, okay, I get paid $1,000. I take $400 and I put in another account, and I live off of $600. And then if you can't do that now, you won't be able to do it later. So prove it to yourself that you can do that. And then that money you then save up, and then you have the money and the finances that you need. So, I don't know. It's good.
All right, let's see. Dr. Glover had asked, what are your tips for time management? Maybe specifically for practice building or
Time
whatnot? Like,
management.
how did you make sure you followed, your timeline?
Okay, maybe he's asking a little question here, but um, my head, I don't have a tip for time management because I don't feel like you can manage time. If a
Mm-hmm.
task takes an hour, it takes an hour. There's no way doing it faster. It takes an hour. Okay. What you have is priority management. So some tasks should not be the first thing you do. And depending on the order in which you do those tasks and you prioritize, you'll get through the other tasks that you need to. But if Dr. Glover has to record all these defocused media podcasts, if it's an hour to do it, he's not managing time. He's prioritizing and he's shuffling and he's organizing time. But it still took the same amount of time. So sometimes people think time management, I can make it shorter. No, some
Mm-hmm.
things if it takes 20 minutes to do the dishes, it takes 20 minutes to do the dishes. It's just a matter of when you get up and do it. So
Right.
I think it's prioritizing and having a schedule and an understanding of what I need to do and what I need to do first and where is my priority and what can wait. Because some things can wait till tomorrow and some things need to get done right now. And as a business
Right.
owner, you realize that pretty quickly. One thing I would say for anybody, because I want to make sure before we get cut off here,
Mm-hmm.
is with business ownership, I did not really think about how many other people's lives are affected by me
Mm-hmm.
until the first. And when I thought about it, but I didn't think of it. And in my first year, we had everybody together for Christmas, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's family was there. And I sat down and said, I got 5 employees. I thought about it as 5 people. But when I saw their spouses and their 3 kids and their mom that lives with them, I was like, hold on. I'm technically responsible for 20 people. I'm
Yeah.
not responsible for 5 because if I don't pay them, there are 20 people that are affected. And I think when I thought about that and I realized that made a huge difference in how I went about and things I did and what I chose to do and what I chose not to do and how
Mm-hmm.
hard I work and how hard I hustle because it was not just my household, it was theirs. And I think if unless you're, and some people go into private practice for the wrong reasons and wrong intentions, and unless you are willing to make sure that you pay them before you pay yourself, you're going to have problems. I know some offices and doctors that let their staff checks bounce and cash their own, and that's not how you do this. That's not how this goes. You made this. You made the decision. You asked them. You hired them. You took them away from another office. It is really on you. I think about that. Through this whole COVID thing, I paid all my staff. It's not their fault that the office was not open. We didn't make any money. I see all these posts about, oh, we're closed. Do I have to pay them and this, that, and the other? It's
Right.
not their fault. They didn't ask. You are the owner. You sink or swim. But that's the thing. You get the good and the bad. You get the best parts and you get the worst parts. And you got to take both of them. You can't just take the good parts. You have to say that this is mine and this is the choice I'm making. And you need to make smart decisions and making sure that your practice is designed to withstand things that happen.
Right.
It's really up to you. You're the CEO. You can't blame the employees for it closing, so they have to take a pay cut. No,
Right.
because you ain't bonusing them enough when it's good. You know what I mean? Come on.
All right. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. We have 6 minutes left. We have one question, actually like 2 questions, but this is quickly about what kind of social sacrifices you've had to make to during this whole process that when you're starting your private practice and then I guess in the beginning when you're hustling and working, did you have to make any sacrifices?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to make sacrifices. You got to make choices. You got to decide on what's important. You got to decide on, how much sleep you want, and how much separation between work and home do you want. You definitely have to work hard. You definitely have to wake up before everybody. You got to be in the office before them. You're gonna have to go in on the nights. You're gonna have to go in on the weekends. When I first opened, I literally was going to every single networking event and every single mixer that I could, shaking hands and kissing babies. And I was
Mm-hmm.
passing cards like I was running for Congress. And there were events that I went to that I did not want to go to. After you had a long day in the office, do I want to go to a wine and cheese social somewhere? Not every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I did, but not all the time. And you have to determine to make that sacrifice, and I'm willing to do that and give up some personal stuff. And there are events and parties and things that I missed because I was working on that Saturday, or I was at an event that I needed to make those sacrifices for the office. So this is all going to come in sacrifice. This is all going to come with things that you have to decide on your why, and that's why. And that's the first thing I ask in the book, is to ask you, why are you doing this? What is your reason? Because there will come a day and there will come a night when you're like, crap, do I want to do this? Why am I doing this? And you need to know that answer. And when you have that answer, and you be like, oh yeah, I know why. You don't like listening to nobody, Adam. So you have to do this, and it's your fault. And you have to decide on, would I rather sink and swim on my own ideas or work with somebody else? And some people say, well, no, I'd rather the comfort level of working for somebody else. And what I would say is, all you're saying is that I trust that CEO over I trust myself, because they can still mess up. They can still go bankrupt. Ask the doctors at Shopko. Ask the doctors at Sears. Ask the doctors at a lot of places that went bankrupt or closed. And now all of a sudden they do not have a practice anymore that they thought was their private practice, and they thought it was just theirs. Next to it, they ask the doctor that gets kicked out of a Lens Crafters because they wanted to bring in somebody new, or they took a day off and they went on vacation with their kids, and the store manager did not meet their bonus. And when it didn't meet their bonus, what did they do? They blamed you, and they said, hey, you went on vacation, you didn't find a fill-in, we missed our bonus, it's your fault, your lease is getting ripped up, and you got to be out by the end of the month. It happens. So,
Yes.
you have to decide on, would I be wanting to sink or swim on my own dime, and am I willing to put my own hustle and my own sweat equity in it? And then and make a determination for yourself. Not everybody has a determination to do it, and I don't think everybody should. Don't get my book wrong. I don't think everybody should work for private practice. I don't think everybody should situations where that's not the best thing for you. Because if you want to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and just go home, collect your check, and go home and check out and let it go, this is not it. This is not for you. You're gonna have to work nights. You're gonna have to work weekends. You're gonna be
Gotta hustle.
You're gonna be sitting up in the bed thinking about a Facebook post or thinking about a marketing idea, and you're gonna be thinking about, oh, did I bill that insurance, or did I do this, or did I order that person's frames? There are things that you're gonna be doing that you wouldn't have to do in a commercial setting. So it's not for everybody, but for the ones that want to do it, I'm just telling you the questions you need to ask yourself and what you have to figure out on your own. And then when you have that information, you're armed with that information, you can then go and make it as successful as possible. Because the question that we missed earlier that you asked was, what's the difference between opening warm and opening cold? And my idea—
I'm going to stop you real quick because we have about 1.5 minutes left before IG Live will cut us off. So those of you who are joining us right now, welcome. Those of you who have been following us, we are going to be stopping this IG Live TV, and we're going to start posting it, and we're going to be starting a fresh one, and we'll be answering warm start versus cold start. And I think we have some fun stories lined up as well. So stay tuned. Come back in about 2 minutes. It takes me to figure this out, but I will see you in just a bit, okay? And we also have our raffle, so we'll be announcing who's going to be winning the signed books at the end of the next session. So if you ask questions, you want to see if you won, follow us along, re-click, and we'll be here. All right. So I'll see you in just a bit, Dr. Ramsey.